one of the things that we did last week was for our psalm is we read the Egyptian Hallel. And this week we're going to read the Great Hallel, which is Hallel Hagal. Hagadol. Thank you. Okay. And there, one thing that I discovered is that there's a plaque at one of the ascent points of the Matterhorn, and there's a little picture here that shows you the plaque. And you won't be able to see it online, Marty, but and it's the translation is from the Luther Bible, which was a translation by Martin Luther for the Luther Bible. But the first quote was, "Oh, give thanks unto the Lord, for he is good, for his mercy endures forever." And that's the quote on the plaque, but then it's followed by a quote from Paul Gayhart. He was a famous author of Lutheran hymns. And so his quote is below that, saying, "My eye sees what God has built for his honor and to teach us how his power is mighty and great." But I can imagine climbing the Matterhorn, what's involved in that, and coming to this plaque, you know, and seeing it with the Matterhorn in the background, you know. But what I thought is if you, for those of you who have your Bibles open to Psalm 136, that I tried to find, mentioned to Andy that I tried to find someone who was singing this psalm and the whole psalm, and I could not find it. I checked with a Jewish friend and said, "Do you know anyone who is where I can get a recording of someone singing this psalm like they're at a Seder or whatever?" And she sent me one, but they only repeat the first two verses when they're singing, and then they just keep repeating it, making it into more of a song. But so I thought we would, she says, usually when we do it, we just read it and don't sing it.
You always read it responsibly.
Well, that's what we're going to do. Okay. I'm going to read the psalm, and after every line, if you see, it ends with "his love endures forever." And so you all can read that after each 36 verse. All you have to do is remember "his love endures forever." I think that it's saying after every one. So it starts, "Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good.
His love endures forever.
Give thanks to the God of gods.
His love endures forever.
Give thanks to the Lord of lords.
His love endures forever.
To him who alone does great wonders,
His love endures forever.
who by his understanding made the heavens,
His love endures forever.
who spread out the earth upon the waters,
His love endures forever.
who made the great lights,
His love endures forever.
the sun to govern the day,
His love endures forever.
the moon and stars to govern the night.
His love endures forever.
To him who struck down the firstborn of Egypt
His love endures forever.
and brought Israel out from among them.
His love endures forever.
With a mighty hand and outstretched arm, his love endures forever. To him who divided the sea of reeds asunder, his love endures forever. And brought Israel through the midst of it.
His love endures forever.
But swept Pharaoh and his army into the sea of reeds.
His love endures forever.
To him who led his people through the wilderness.
His love endures forever.
To him who struck down great kings.
His love endures forever.
And killed mighty kings.
His love endures forever.
Shihon, king of the Amorites,
His love endures forever.
and Og, king of Bashan,
His love endures forever.
and gave their land as an inheritance,
His love endures forever.
an inheritance to his servant Israel.
His love endures forever.
He remembered us in our low estate,
His love endures forever.
and freed us from our enemies.
His love endures forever.
He gives food to every creature.
His love endures forever.
Give thanks to the God of heaven.
His love endures forever.
I had a professor in college who I thought it was very interesting. You said the Reed Sea, and many people, the Red Sea, and the Reed Sea is inches. I mean, it's not very deep at all, which is why reeds grow out of it and stuff. And we had a student in class arguing with the professor about the miracle of parting of the Red Sea, saying it was the Reed Sea and wind sweeps the water aside.
Yeah.
It's no big deal. And the professor, not missing a beat, looked at him and he goes, okay, then the miracle was that the entire Egyptian army drowned in a couple of inches of water. And then that, he just moved right on.
In the NIV, it says the Red Sea,
Yeah.
and yet it goes down in the, and has a footnote that says often, the Reed Sea. And so I was wondering, in your Bibles, what did it say?
Right.
Red.
It's red, it's not,
It's red, but it has the footnote.
Yeah.
that,
Yeah,
yeah.
Or Sea of
Sea
Reed.
of-
So I thought I would read it, the Reed Sea, to see what you all would say.
Yeah.
Quicksand.
Yeah.
no, they did a really, really good job. So I was watching, there's a new, I don't know, not new, but there was a movie that came out in like early 2000s about Moses, and it's called The Exodus. And it's starring Christian Bale of Batman fame. But he does a really magnificent job acting the role of Moses. But they deal with the whole Red Sea thing in that way, which was really marvelous. So they come out to this big sea of water, and and he's feeling around because he knows there is a crossing in there and everything. But the crossing is only present when the wind blows a certain way, and then when the wind stops blowing, the water comes back down. I think they ended up actually dealing with it though, like it looked like almost like an earthquake when a subterranean earthquake hits. The waters all went out, and then they rushed back as a big tsunami, and it was like.
Yeah.
It was really interesting to be presented in a way that looked like and behaved like a natural, like God using natural events and natural parts of earth, as opposed to, the Jello mold that Charleston Heston walks between.
Yeah. Mhm. And which one was it that you see this big wall of water and a whale swimming behind it?
Yeah.
Just the whales, would whales be in the Red Sea? Maybe. Maybe.
There are places like that
It is
throughout the world. There's is it Nova Scotia or somewhere up that way? There's a famous river, and when the tide goes out and comes back in, it's 50 feet.
The Bay of Fundy.
Bay of Fundy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it was at Bar Harbor where we went, and they said you could drive out to this island. But be sure you know the tide charts, because when it comes to people get out there and they
It
get
gets
halfway out, their
cars.
cars get
Yeah.
stuck.
Well, in 2011, Pope Benedict the 16th had a kind of a lecture on Psalm 136, and he said that Psalm 136 kind of sums up the entire history of of salvation recording in the Old Testament. Okay, and if you kind of remember reading through that, 1 through 3 gives a triple invitation for worshiping God. Where it is, thanks to the Lord, for he is good, thanks to the God of gods, thanks to the Lord of lords. So it starts out with 3, a triple invitation. And then it goes on to the one who works great wonders. And then in 5 through 9, it says, talks about the creation. So, Genesis with the heavenly bodies, the earth, the moon, that type of thing. And then begins 10 through 20, kind of goes through the liberation of Egypt. And killing of the firstborn, the Exodus, the crossing of the sea, the journey through the desert, and the arrival in the promised land. So it kind of goes through all of that journey that they're on. You remember that this is one of the prayers or hymns at Passover. So it's a reminder, to all of the people, the Jewish community, about what they had been through and reminding them of the past. And then it follows up and it kind of goes back and returns back to creation at the very end, God giving us food and worshiping God again. So one of the things that the Pope brought up was, this is the Jewish prayer about the Jewish history, and how can we make this psalm our own prayer, from that point of view. I don't know if you have any thoughts about that. Because it's a part of the religious history that we study too, with the Old Testament. You're always talking about how important the Old Testament
I love the Old
is.
Testament. Yeah. I do believe.
Well, I think it easily becomes a prayer for us, because in so many ways it talks about men of faith that believed in God and believed in his love, that it was forever, like it wasn't going to go away. And here are all the ways that we can see that he loves us, all the things he's done for us as a nation, as a people, and surely all of us. And without those great men of faith and the prophets and all of those people, we would not maybe have recognized that Christ was the fulfillment of his loving kindness.
Oh, that was just such a perfect summary for moving into chapter 11.
Yeah.
The Pope ended his comment about 136 with, I would therefore like to conclude by reading from St. John, and this is first John 3 through 1. See what great love the Father has lavished on us, that we should be called children of God, and that is what we are.
Yeah, one of my big takeaways from the Old Testament is always the immense just volume of God's forgiveness and ability to forgive his people, whether it be individual or collective. The communion that we have with God, the commitment to the promises that we have with God, are that continual love and commitment to always return to God, and God will return to us, and none of that is deserved or earned or whatever, and people have done so much to break with that at times, but God keeps welcoming us back.
Well, and as children of God, what do you expect of your parent?
You'd like to think so.
It's not all- it's real interesting, if you've ever seen the Sistine Chapel when there's not 10 million people around, which I did have an opportunity to do. If you have time to study, and even in pictures, the image of God reaching out to reaching out to Adam, and God, every muscle in his body. And, my point is, we're painted that he's stretching much more than 50% of the way, almost all the way.
And poor Adam.
And Adam's like, all right, and I just think, what a conscious representation of how we take for granted the immense love that's being channeled in by him. Every piece of him is reaching out to us.
Yeah, and do you need binoculars to be able to see it?
Not if there's not a million people and you're not being moved through, which is like what?
I couldn't look up to see it.
Yeah, but I can't look up, you would have a hard time.
You can look at the book.
Yeah, right, right.
I've seen it.
No, I know, it's like, I have that feeling anytime I'm in a large church, especially with good acoustics. And, in a church by myself alone. And that is always this amazing feeling. And it's like, I have done that a number of times at like Lynchburg College. The door's always unlocked at the chapel at Lynchburg. So I'll walk in and I'll just, be there and then I'll go home and start singing. Just it's wonderful. Just this wonderful feeling. And without pictures.
Yes.
Well, in chapter 10, we ended with the statement that you need to persevere so that when you have done the will of God, you will receive what he has promised. For in just a little while, he who is coming will come and will not delay. But by my righteous one will live in faith. I take no pleasure in the one who shrinks back, but we do not belong to those who shrink back and are destroyed, but to those who have faith and are saved. And so with this, the writer is getting us ready for chapter 11, where we're anticipating that roll call of those that we've known, people that we've known that didn't shrink back and held to their faith. And so we begin chapter 11. And so up to this point, we've had all the contrast. If you remember, we talked about the Hebrews comparing God to the angels, and in Jesus that we found God's word, that we have hope for a new creation. He's our eternal priest. He's the perfect sacrifice. And so now we should follow all the models of faith that we have throughout history of the scriptures and remain faithful to Jesus, trusting that despite whatever hardships or persecution, God will not abandon his people. And so we begin with chapter 11, and the chapter is called either Heroes of Faith in one book and Faith in Action in another.
Mine titles it The Exemplary Faith of Our Ancestors.
So it's like, listen, see what these people did,
Right.
okay? So I thought I think I might read some of this, okay? Now, faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. This is what the ancients were commended for. By faith, we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen was not made out of what was visible. I love that, thinking about Big Bang and everything and physics, everything coming from nothing or a point. By faith, and it begins at the very beginning, by faith, Abel brought God a better offering than Cain did. By faith, he was commended as righteous when God spoke well of his offerings. And by faith, Abel still speaks, even though he is dead. Okay, so we start with Genesis. Then by faith, Enoch was taken from this life so that he did not experience death. He could not be found because God had taken him away. For before he was taken, he was commended as one who pleased God. And without faith, it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. So we have Enoch's faith from Genesis. And by faith, Noah, when warned about things not yet seen, in holy fear, built an ark to save his family. By his faith, he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness that is in keeping with faith. Still in Genesis. By faith, Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. By faith, he made his home in the promised land like a stranger in a foreign country. He lived in tents, as did Isaac and Jacob, who were heirs with him of the same promise. For he was looking forward to the city with foundations, whose architect and builder is God. And by faith, even Sarah, who was past childbearing age, was enabled to bear children because she considered him faithful who had made the promise. And so from this one man, and he as good as dead, came descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as countless as the sand on the shore. All these people were still living by faith when they died. So Sarah had her promise
I
fulfilled.
don't know, the way I'm reading this is not saying anything about Sarah having faith or being honored by the writer here for her faith. I'm reading this as Abraham is honored by his faith and Sarah was made to had her womb open. But yeah, so it's saying in my translation that by faith Abraham received power of procreation, even though he was too old, and Sarah herself was barren, because he considered himself faithful who had promised.
Mhm.
Nothing about Sarah's faith.
Mhm.
Mine says, by faith, even Sarah herself received ability to conceive.
Interesting.
And that's how mine
Well,
words it too. Yeah.
Mine reads more like yours, but then it puts a footnote reading more like what they got.
Awkwardly,
Yeah.
so it's one
Yeah.
of those Greek
Yeah.
sentences that can be worded a number of
Right.
different ways, that was awkward in Greek,
Oops.
so it makes it
Yeah.
awkward in English.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it says in some manuscripts, Sarah is the subject of the sentence. By faith, Sarah received this. So Sarah's faith is unseen as parallel to Abraham's. She is one of the heroic people of faith. So again, it depends on, I guess, the original manuscript that they're translating from, because it looks like both, that there's multiple manuscripts.
Well, consider the time,
Originals.
consider the time.
Yeah.
The women were very important.
I know, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Consider
That's,
the time.
that's.
All these
understand that.
people were still living by faith when they died. They did not receive the things promised. They only saw them and welcomed them from a distance, admitting that they were foreigners and strangers on earth. People who say such things show that they are looking for a country of their own. If they had been thinking of the country they had left, they would have had opportunity to return. Instead, they were longing for a better country, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. And then it goes on, by faith, Abraham again. By faith, Abraham, when God tested him, offered Isaac as a sacrifice. He who had embraced the promises was about to sacrifice this one and only son, even though God had said to him, It is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned. Abraham reasoned that God would even raise the dead, and so in a manner of speaking, he did receive Isaac back from death. Then it moves on. By faith, Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau in regard to their future. By faith, Jacob, when he was dying, blessed each of Joseph's sons and worshiped as he leaned on top of his staff. By faith, Joseph, when his end was near, spoke about the exodus of the Israelites from Egypt and gave instruction concerning the burial of his bones. And this one I found interesting. By faith, Moses's parents hid him for 3 months after he was born because they saw he was no ordinary child and they were not afraid of the king's edicts.
By faith, his sister brought him to
That's right.
the Egyptian princess.
That's right. We need to edit. Put it in Wikipedia.
Because that takes a huge amount of faith to say, okay, I'm gonna bring you and put you in the bed of the enemy.
Mhm.
And trust that you're going to be safe.
By faith, Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to be mistreated along with the people of God rather than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. He regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ as of greater value than the treasures of Egypt, because he was looking ahead to his reward. By faith, he left Egypt, not fearing the king's anger. He persevered because he saw him who was invisible. By faith, he kept the Passover and the application of blood, so that the destroyer of the firstborn would not touch the firstborn of Israel. Then by faith, the people passed through the Red Sea as on dry land. But when the Egyptians tried to do so, they were drowned. We can see this story kind of being played out like it was in 136 in the Psalm. By faith, the walls of Jericho fell after the army had marched around them for 7 days. By faith, the prostitute Rahab, because she welcomed the spies, was not killed with those who were disobedient. What more shall I say? I do not have time to tell about Gideon and Barak and Samson and Jephthah, about David and Samuel and the prophets, who through faith conquered kingdoms, administered justice, and gained what was promised, who shut the mouths of lions, quenched the fury of the flames, and escaped the edge of the sword, whose weakness was turned to strength, and who became powerful in battle and routed foreign armies. Women received back their dead, raised to life again. There were others who were tortured, refusing to be released, so that they might gain an even better resurrection. Some faced jeers and flogging, and even chains and imprisonment. They were put to death by stoning. They were sawed in two. Who was the one that was sawed in two? Isaiah? Isaiah was sawn asunder, it says.
Sorry, I hear sawed in two and I keep thinking of sort of like.
Houdini.
Right?
Oh, wait a minute, my book has a footnote for that one. Some apocryphal books say this was how King Manasseh had Isaiah executed.
That's
So-
not.
So it wasn't Isaiah that said it, but
No, it wasn't
Later.
Isaiah, it
Yeah.
happened to, was sawn aside, Isaiah was sawn asunder.
yeah,
And then it had
the
the
tradition
the
later
tradition,
speculated.
right? They were put to death, let's see, they were sawed to death. They were killed by the sword. They went about in sheepskin and goatskin, destitute, persecuted and mistreated. The world was not worthy of them. They wandered in deserts and mountains, living in caves and in holes in the ground. They were all commended for their faith, and yet none of them received what was promised, what had been promised, since God had something plan something better for us, so that only together with us would they be made perfect. So, all of these people through faith were working towards something better, but they might not have seen it in their lifetime. And so now we've got in Hebrews, we've got people, and Hebrews, I think was just written, they think it was written before the temple fell. So this was a time when people were Christians were being persecuted. And this chapter is saying, look at these heroes, look at these people before you who have been through this, and they kept their faith. And so you need to keep your faith. And how does that pertain to us even today? We see, we have life easy, pretty much, most of us. I mean, we have the normal heartbreaks, loves, and heartbreaks that every human has. But, you think of someone who is in someone who's maybe 2 miles from here, who doesn't have food, who's struggling every day. And how do you keep faith? And so that's an issue that they're going through now with Hebrews, and that this letter is being written, this sermon is being prepared to try to help people live up to it. But it's very hard to think about something that's going to happen, it's like when your grandfather would say, when you plant a tree, it's not going to be for you. It's going to be for the next generation, because of the time it takes. Yeah.
Sounds like the early course in the power of positive thinking. I had this flash in my mind when I was at the museum. I worked with these Japanese technicians and artists who mostly spoke no English, and we put together one of the first animatronic dinosaur exhibits that came to the country. And they gave me this doll called a Katsuzo doll. So positive thinking kind of thing, and this little thing, you push it and it would go, persevere and you shall succeed, and we wave the silver flag. And I just kept thinking about that Katsuzo doll.
You can do it. You can do it.
Wake up, you sleepyhead. You take these little recordings and
And my Bible has the footnote for that for verses 39 and 40. These all won acknowledgement through their faith, but they did not receive what was promised, since God had made provision for us to have something better, and they were not to reach perfection except with us. So that perfection of Christ, but they couldn't reach that until Christ came. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and chapter 12 starts with the first 3 verses. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart.
My favorite person. Hold on.
Yeah.
That
I remember
We
you
have-
mentioning 12. I thought you said there was something in 13.
No, it was 12. I just like the whole idea of that we are united with the whole cloud of believers, that are cheering us on to run the race here on life in life. And to reject all the things that trip us up and
I think he was also saying, I had 3 things written down. That sometimes the success is not deemed by what we leave behind. And he's talking about the material possession. Some people count success by what they leave behind. A lot of money, a big house, a big whatever. And I used to keep children and I had the plastic surgeon here in Richmond, Joe. I can't think of what his last name was, but he came out of a large Catholic family, put himself through school. And I kept his son, and one night, Joe and his wife came in, and I took one look at him, and I said, what is the problem? He said, all these people were putting in big sums of money, and he couldn't put the fellow in. And you know what I told him? I said, Joe, success is not measured by that. The second one, keep the main thing, the main thing. Jesus is our main thing. We need to keep him there. And the third one is keep your eyes on your purpose, which is Jesus, because he's the final product that we're going for. And Paul said, the time of my departure is near. He listed 3 things. I have run the race. I have kept the faith. And I have fought the good fight.
I think too, though, that keep your eyes on Christ, but only as it leads you to God. Because, you know, the Christ, if you talk about Trinity, right, but that Jesus was praying to God and wanting us to come closer to God and not just worshiping the physical living Jesus, but what Jesus is telling us about. He wants us to have that closer relationship with God. And that now we can have that, you know, through Christ.
you know, it's the way that I always think about the Trinity is that God, all of them existed God, but God so loved us that he sent his son to die for us and also give us a glimpse at who he is, you know, so that we would not lose faith, we would not, and to fulfill the covenant, the new covenant, create the new covenant. And then finally, he so loved us and desires a relationship with us, he sent the Holy Spirit to help us out, to help us once again unite and commune with the triune God. And I see it all being done out of his incredible love for us and a desire to have a relationship with us.
Well, and when it comes to experiencing, you know, God experiences God through us. If everything is one, you can't experience it. You have to be outside. That's why the dichotomy of the earth, of living in the physical world, you know, that you can only experience bad if you good if you know bad, if bad exists.
Offers duality,
And so
plenty of contrast for expansion.
we are children of God and we are living, you know, live your life and love your life and do good things, you know, because you're, you know, God's living with other people through you.
Jesus came when he came because humanity had fallen deeper and deeper down into that rabbit hole of duality and materialism. And Jesus Christ came at the time to throw a rope to humanity and help nudge back onto the path and say, my brothers and sisters, wake up, you have forgotten from whence you came. God never condemned. God never forgives because God never condemned. You know, a lot of this stuff that we're throwing around this room is all from human perspective and, you know, human creation of a God. You know,
Sin is always what we do to separate ourselves. It's never what God's done.
right,
And it's like, it's our choice.
Right,
to come
exactly.
Back to God.
exactly.
And,
It's
but
all
we have to
choices we've
reach
made.
out.
It's not any choices that God made, it's
Yeah.
choices that we've made.
God is always
Even the
there.
belief
Sure.
in that we are something separate from God,
Right.
which we're not.
No.
And
Which is what Jesus was
Jesus-
trying to say.
So this
Right,
comes
Jesus was
back
trying to
to
say.
like, we are part of nature, and nature is, and my whole philosophy on God the Spirit is that everything in existence, it's like, it aligns perfectly with science. It's like science, energy and matter are you know, it's like there is not really a difference between the two. They just, going back and forth between the two. And all of nature, all of the creation, everything is God. We are all automatically part of God as part of the creation. And
Well, here again,
connected in that thing.
it's much more than that. It's nature. Here again, what you refer as nature is part of this material dimension. God resides within.
You
what-
assume that I'm saying that.
Well, I mean, I'm listening to what you're saying. And if I'm misinterpreting, please tell me that I'm misinterpreting. I'm not making any assumptions. I'm listening to what you're saying. But God resides within what we perceive as the empty space.
No.
We are more, that's your opinion. We are more space than we are,
Well, that's true.
we are more space than we are actual.
Alpha and
Material.
Omega. God is
Right.
everything.
But
Exactly, nothing stands outside of God, but
what I'm saying is, you go back to Einstein, E equals MC squared. Matter and energy are interchangeable and go back and forth dynamically between the two. God is all of that, and within all of that, and part of all of that.
God is what holds that matter together.
No, God
God
is
is
the
the
matter
image,
as
yeah.
well. Everything is God. The space as well as the matter, because it can go back and forth between the energy, the not
Okay,
visible
then,
and visible. It's all-
the matter of your body, yeah, then you're telling me the matter of your, okay, let's move on.
It's transient.
Well,
I'm saying
it's
the matter of your body is transient.
on time.
And
Yes.
yeah,